don't know. Tim Walz is out there talking again.
You say you could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked their and they're scared of him because he could fix a truck. Like they're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. That's what he said. I'm like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't.
I fear.
I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools, you're
You were saying that men he worked with in the National Guard in Nebraska went to the FBI because they believed he had given classified military secrets to the Chinese government?
They suspect that he did.
Suspected to the point that they went to the FBI.
And then China started producing almost a carbon copy of this military tank a couple of years later.
Come on. For real?
According to all of our research.
Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson just took Minnesota Governor Tim Walz on a one-way trip to Rose City, and it wasn't pretty. Rogan lit him up with raw disbelief and biting humor, while Tucker sliced through his policies like a steakhouse chef with a grudge. From pandemic blunders to crime surges, they exposed Walz as a walking disaster wrapped in polite incompetence. If weak leadership had a mascot, this takedown made sure it now comes with a name tag.
doing the exact same thing.
Right.
Exact same thing. And he said, of course, it's a Nazi salute. He said that.
Right.
We spent 3 days debating, having them trying to debate that President Musk gave a Nazi salute. Of course he did. But that is a distraction.
This is how crazy things have gotten. Like,
it's coordinated propaganda.
So who is Tim Walz exactly? Most of us, I just want to say I think he's should be investigated by the sex crimes unit. I really feel that way. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but he's one of the creepiest people I've ever seen. The vibe I get off that guy, I would not let him in my house. That's just my feeling. Maybe I'm being totally unfair.
Joe Rogan leaned back in his chair, arms folded, that skeptical look creeping over his face like he'd just been told a vegan burger tastes exactly like a steak. The topic of the moment, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Rogan didn't even pretend to hold back. He launched in like a human torpedo of logic and disbelief. This wasn't going to be a light jab. It was a 190 proof rant on government failure, and Tim Walz just happened to be the designated peanutter.
you know how gangster that is?
Yeah.
You shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I look like a deer. Is there any way to you that we're not being gaslit like by Kamala Harris?
In what way?
Like, wasn't she like a joke even among Democrats?
First, he honed in on Walz's pandemic response. Rogan chuckled, shaking his head like he was recalling a bad sci-fi plot. He said Tim Walz treated Minnesota like a petri dish trying to engineer the most confusing, restrictive, and illogical rules imaginable. Small businesses closed, schools stayed shut, but big box stores thrived. Rogan mocked the logic behind shuttering gyms while keeping liquor stores open, joking that Walz must have believed alcohol killed the virus better than fresh air and exercise.
His wedding anniversary, they were married 5 years after Tiananmen Square, and he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's
their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on. You're sure he picked the anniversary?
They've talked about this
in
interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
But Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
Oh my God.
Then came the masked mandates. Rogan rolled his eyes so hard it was like watching a man try to erase a cafeteria memory. He painted a picture of Tim Walz flipping through a pandemic playbook written by Twitter activists and bureaucrats who hadn't seen sunlight since Y2K. It wasn't science-based leadership. Rogan argued it was pandemic theater, with Walz storing as the lead actor and Minnesota citizens as the confused extras.
It doesn't bother me that much. If the people in Minnesota like it, who cares? It's just a star and some colors. The real problem is when you hear discussions of things that are openly Marxist philosophies, when you hear talk about equal outcomes and not just equal opportunity, but that we all need to arrive at the same place, equal outcome talk. There's only one way they can do that, and it's by forcing you.
Well, it's by everyone having nothing.
Yeah.
That's the only way to have things totally equal, because you
Exactly.
can't have everyone have everything. That's impossible.
Right. There's no way. There's not enough resources.
And then came the riots. Rogan wasn't even angry, just baffled. The way Walz handled the George Floyd protests, and more importantly, the chaos that followed, left him speechless, if only for half a second. He dove in like a man watching a firefighter toss gasoline on a blaze. Rogan pointed out how Minneapolis resembled a post-apocalyptic film set, and Walz's plan seemed to involve looking surprised and staying quiet while entire blocks burned.
I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it.
First of all, kudos to CBS for allowing Governor Walz to quote Matthew 25:40 without interrupting him and saying, I'm sorry, that's an attempt at bringing in foreign disinformation campaigns. We can't accept that.
May those words burn on your tongue.
Right.
Rogan joked that Walz seemed to be aiming for a world record in delayed crisis response, waiting for the fire to send an invite before acting. He mocked Walz's leadership as nothing more than press conferences and wishful thinking, comparing it to a substitute teacher trying to control chaos with a pamphlet. On education, Rogan blasted Walz's bond with teachers' unions, calling it a hostage situation. Schools stayed closed so long that kids forgot pencils existed, while union leaders were treated like prophets. Public education, he said, had become a slogan-spewing vending machine with zero results.
If someone is going to inherit your soul, they don't want it bogged down with bad habits.
Right. Yeah, well, they don't want it to be evil. They want it to have negative energy attached to it and the karma of killing a bunch of people.
Right.
Like, who wants Dick Cheney's soul? You know? The alien's like, you could have that, dude.
Remember when he shot someone and then the guy apologized to him? Isn't that nuts?
You know how gangster that is?
Yeah.
You shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I look like a deer. Is there any way to you that we're not being gaslit like to hell by Kamala Harris?
In what way?
Then, like a stand-up comic with a mean streak, Rogan went after Walz's image. He said the guy looked like he was always about to apologize for things he didn't understand. His voice, his presence, it wasn't confidence. It was a political shrug in a tie. Rogan joked that Walz looked like a middle manager forced to give a disaster prep talk while the building burned behind him. Then came Tucker Carlson, and if Rogan brought sarcasm, Tucker brought the scalpel. He didn't shout, he didn't blink. He dismantled Tim Walz with that icy smile that says, "You don't know it yet, but I'm about to destroy your whole persona." Tucker started with one word: weak. He called Tim Walz the poster boy for what happens when ideology replaces reality. He wasn't governing Minnesota, he was managing feelings. Afraid to offend, terrified of confrontation, addicted to platitudes. Tucker described Walz as someone who mistook indecision for compassion and thought that hesitation made him virtuous.
I think it's fake. All of it.
Well, that Walz guy, I mean, I don't want to be too unfair because I don't know him and I don't have any hard evidence. He's a weirdo. That guy's weird.
He seems very
I'm
strange,
sorry.
yes.
There's something not right about that guy's personal life. So I hope I'm wrong because I don't want people like that with power. But most people I know with power in Washington have personal lives who would not withstand scrutiny.
Tucker Carlson ripped into Tim Walz's handling of the George Floyd aftermath, not for showing sympathy, but for disappearing when leadership was most needed. While the public panicked and businesses burned, Walz hid behind scripted sorrow and vague platitudes. Tucker compared him to a ship captain offering therapy instead of steering from danger. He slammed Walz as the poster child for soft-on crime policies, letting ideologues dictate safety while families paid the price. Police were vilified, crime soared, and Tucker called it moral abdication with a press badge. On the economy, he mocked Walz's high-tax policies as a blueprint for driving out the middle class, describing his rallies as auditions for how to fail upward.
Tasked with choosing the new flag and seal made its final selections this week, and the new design will debut next year. It follows 4 months of meetings, many spirited debates, and 2,500 submissions from the public sharing their ideas for the new symbols.
This is why they changed it, is He said it was problematic.
Problematic. Oh, I love that term. Our current flag is problematic. I think we all know that. We've evolved into a more diverse state, and I think it's more reflective of that.
Tucker then tore into Walz's cultural agenda, calling Minnesota a test lab for woke politics. Schools became confusion centers, government offices activist hubs, and his pandemic response was riddled with double standards. Protests allowed, churches banned. Walz's leadership wasn't strong, it was performance art for elite online spectators. His tone, like reading bedtime stories to a nervous public. Tucker's final blow. Walz was built to fail in a moment that demanded strength, more therapist than governor, when Minnesotans needed a fighter.
But also, interestingly enough, he has a confession letter. This is what I would call it. It's a letter made out to the FBI to Kash Patel that says that Governor Tim Walz made him do this.
By the time both Rogan and Carlson had spoken, Tim Walz wasn't just roasted, he was incinerated. One used raw, mocking disbelief, the other used surgical dismantling. And yet, both came to the same conclusion. Tim Walz wasn't leading a state, he was managing its decline. And the worst part, he didn't even realize it. Joe Rogan circled back in disbelief, like a man watching a magician saw someone in half, only to realize the person's actually gone. He mocked Walz's Olympic-level ability to dodge responsibility. Rogan said Walz could watch a city collapse and still blame it on weather, miscommunication, or vague societal failure. He likened Walz's leadership to a broken GPS that keeps recalculating while you're sinking in quicksand. 1 minute, he's pledging safety. The next, another police department implodes while Walz hosts a diversity seminar in the rubble. Rogan imagined Walz surrounded by policy advisors who'd never touched grass, much less reality. Then he targeted Walz's bizarre press conference style. Rogan laughed at how Walz always looked ready to apologize, but never actually did. He called it a masterclass in hollow sincerity, each speech a word salad tossed with fear, indecision, and a dip of smugness.
He was running for Congress.
Well, there's more than one thing, too, right? He said he was a head coach.
Yeah, he was a head coach.
He was not a head coach. He was an assistant coach, which is an honorable thing. There's nothing wrong with being an assistant coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he also inflated his actual rank, right? He was slated to achieve a certain rank.
Right.
And how did it go? Like, he had to commit to the fact that he wasn't going to retire in order to achieve his...
Tucker, armed with a velvet-gloved sledgehammer, turned the spotlight to Walz's obsession with consensus. He argued Walz had made governing into a group project. Everyone got a ribbon, but no one told the truth. Minnesota, he said, wasn't suffering from bad luck. It was suffering from cowardice dressed up as diplomacy. Tucker pointed out that Walz never leads, he waits to hear what the loudest voices demand, then cautiously steps forward with his smile and his script. Tucker likened it to someone joining a parade halfway through and pretending they'd organized. The whole thing, it wasn't leadership, it was opportunism in khakis, and they weren't done.
But I think that, but I can't get past the core fact about Walz, which is he presided over, allowed the biggest city in the state to get burned down.
And seemed to not only allow it, but kind of
he liked
and
it.
Support it, you know?
Well, yeah, did you see the video of his wife saying, I kept the windows open so I could smell the burning rubber from the riots?
I did not see that.
Wow. The wife whose hand he shook?
Not even close. Rogan circled back to Walz's climate agenda, calling it more theater than solution. He mocked how Walz acted like electric buses, and wind turbines would solve potholes and end violent crime. Rogan joked about Walz standing beside a windmill, pretending it generated common sense. Meanwhile, Tucker focused on rising taxes, saying Walz bled the middle class dry while handing out ideological trophies. He claimed under Walz, hard work was punished and virtue signaling rewarded. Together, they agreed Minnesota had become a textbook case of how not to govern. Rogan brought the exasperation, Tucker brought the scalpel. They didn't just describe Walz as ineffective, they framed him as a leader who looked good on paper and fell apart the second reality showed up, and that knock on the door, it wasn't just knocking. It had already blown the hinges off.